It's really my honor to introduce Dr. Jillian Kinzie. I'm sure a lot of you know that name. Jillian is the Associate Director for the Center of Post-Secondary Research, and most of us are very familiar with NSSE, the National Survey of Student Engagement. In fact, a lot of us use that assessment on our campuses, and probably many of us have had conversations with Dr. Kinzie. Dr. Kinzie coordinates the NSSE Institute project activities. She has a PhD from Indiana University in Higher Education with a minor in Women's Studies. She comes to the NSSE staff from the faculty at IU, where she coordinated the master's program in higher education and student affairs from 2000 to 2002, and then I'm sure she was plucked and recruited over to NSSE. She has more than a decade of additional experience as a research associate and administrative work in academic and student affairs. Her research interests are many, but they include college choice, first-year student development, teaching and learning in college, access and equity, and women in underrepresented fields. I've heard her speak many times, including the last few years at AAC&U. She's a terrific speaker. She has some very interesting things to say, and I'd like to welcome Dr. Kinzie to the stage.
Man, I hope I can deliver on that. Okay. Well, thank you. I'm really honored to be here. And I have to say, I'm not only honored to be here and speaking with this group, but I consider student affairs really my home profession. So that's what, despite what role I have now, whatever that might be, really it's my home. So I'm particularly honored to be here, and I'm really proud to be here and speaking with you about this work, because I think probably for too long we haven't engaged this audience in this important work. So I'm really proud that the profession has really stepped up, and you have stepped up to make this a commitment to be here for the day. And I know from talking with Cindy that things are not ending with this. So if you thought this was all you were committing to when you came here today, you're wrong. You actually are now kind of deputized to do more work on these topics. And I really hope you take up that charge and that challenge to not only spread some of the ideas and the things that we're thinking about here on your own campus, but are also taking that to other associations with which you work. I mean, I know you all have professional networks and functional area groups and other folks that you're meeting with regularly, and to try and infuse the same ideas through that. How are we addressing these really big issues that are impinging on the work of higher education? So I'm excited and I'm proud that Student Affairs has taken up this. So congratulations to the folks that organized this work. It makes me really happy to be part of the profession. And you know, there's certainly a lot to talk about. Kent said that through my work with NSSE at the National Survey of Student Engagement, and now with NALOA, the National Institute for Learning Outcome Assessment, I've been focused on accountability in higher education for at least the last really 12 years now. So it's been a long time, and I have a lot of perspective on this. In fact, I probably have enough perspective to go the rest of the afternoon, but I will spare you that, and I promise to end on time. But perspective is certainly something that I've gained over the years, and I want to talk a little bit about kind of some of the things, or at least summarize a little what we've seen. See if I can make it work, what we've seen more recently, and to kind of remind us, or at least highlight, some of the current accountability initiatives. And Mary actually already talked about this and really introduced the current attention that's been placed on, in this case, price, value, and student outcomes. That's coming from the administration. And this has been, you know, this is not new. This has been driving the work for at least, you know, before that, Margaret Spelling's work, and now through Obama administration. Mary even used the phrase that I often quote from Obama that said, you know, kind of getting the most bang out of your educational buck. That is the current kind of tenor, the idea that's out there right now in terms of what students really ought to be getting out of higher education, and that we need to raise the college graduation rate. These are the big issues right now that are pressing. You know, the other one that we've mentioned and we've talked a little bit about is this performance measure that's kind of out there, and you know, we don't know exactly what it's going to measure and what result or what outcome that's going to have for higher education, but it's certainly the latest gust over the last probably 6 months in terms of what's going on, in terms of really putting some more pressure on higher education to respond and perform. And then, there are these, generated from our own higher ed scholarship, ongoing concerns about persistence and completion rates. So this comes from Vince Tinto's work that, he's certainly been, the king monitoring persistence and studying retention rates in higher education for a long time. And, this is a pretty fine point. The fact that half of all college students in the US will not complete their degrees in 6 years is really, it's a terrible thing. We need to be advancing more students through the educational program faster and at greater rates. So there's no denying the state of student success right now. There's some real question about that. And then there's also some questions about what students are doing in college. There was this terrible period where we went through kind of describing college as leisure time, and that it was a time when students weren't doing a whole lot with during their college education, and that's just really concerned me a lot. But yet here I am contributing to a lot of this same stuff with NSSE data that shows that students are only studying in the first year about 14 hours per week, 15 hours for seniors. I'm actually contributing to this kind of impression, but I'm not making this data up. This is what students are reporting. And that's been one of the most consistent data points we've had since the start of NSSE, is how much time, or I should say how little time, students, full-time students, are able to dedicate to preparing for academic work. And then, let me just layer on top of this, the other kind of stunner for me is when I see that 48% of seniors across institutions are reporting spending 0. They actually have to choose 0. They could choose 1 to 5, but they choose 0 on the survey to say that they're just not doing any sort of co-curricular experiences. So this notion that somehow students are not studying and they're, goofing off and doing all this other stuff, involved in intramurals and, involved in all these leadership, is not true. I mean, it just isn't. They're spending their time in lots of different ways. It's a complicated story. They're working a lot. They're doing other things. They're distracted by a lot of things. They have a lot of time that really is kind of unproductive, I think. So there's a lot going on. And I think this is an opportunity for us. How are students spending their time, and what should they really be doing? What do we really want them to be doing, to make the most out of their college experience? So there's this lingering question out there. So this is another pressure that higher education has to deal with. And then the one that really kind of keeps me up at night is about, okay, geez, what are they learning? What evidence do we have that they're really learning things that they need to know? And this quote actually comes from Ben Wildavsky, who now has joined the faculty at the University of Albany, but he's been pretty outspoken about some of his concerns and the lack of comparative evidence about what students are learning. And so this is a pretty serious matter too. So we've got, how students are spending their time and what they're learning, all these pressures. And then finally, this notion about, are students ready for work? This is, there's some skepticism about, are they even ready to perform in the knowledge-based economy? Are they ready? Do they have the experience and skills necessary? This was kind of a pretty lukewarm statement from employers. 47% of employers said colleges are doing a good job of prepping graduates for the world of work. They didn't say excellent. They didn't say a great job. They said a good job. So that's, certainly something inspiring us to work a little harder to help prepare students to be better prepared for the workplace. And then finally, this bigger perception that higher education is simply busted. It's just broken. And this one came from somebody I always considered a friend of higher education, Elizabeth Warren, who, this came from a Here and Now radio program just, it was weeks ago in May 8th or 6th, I guess it was. And, she is essentially saying that what I think is notable about her quote is what she intimates that there is so much broken about higher education that refinancing is not even going to touch what's really broken about higher education, which scared the heck out of me. You know, I just thought, oh no, what does she think is broken? You know, is she on this bandwagon too? So I was getting really concerned about, you know, what are these perceptions that are out there about higher education, and how do we confront them and straighten out the ones that are complete misperceptions and that are really wrong in lots of ways, and then how do we make sure that we're the ones delivering the message about what's good about higher education and what its value is and what students are doing and how prepared they are for the world of work. That we need to be better at telling the story. Otherwise, I think we're going to continue to see a lot of these perceptions out there. So there's mounting pressure for a greater accountability in higher education. And I actually think, as much as I say student affairs is under more pressure than ever to demonstrate the impact of their work, of its work, I think this is actually a positive thing. I mean, that might be scary initially, but I think we have a lot to say about the impact of our work. So we just need to figure out how to say it in a way that both is communicated on our campus and that there's a clear message on our own campus, and then how do we spread that to these other publics and stakeholders who are concerned. So I actually think this is a good thing. We're under more pressure, and actually we can deliver. We can deliver on this. So in some ways, you know, I see this session, this gathering today as really trying to empower us a little bit more in higher education to tell the story that we know to be true about our students' experience. And this is not the first time we've talked about these issues. For those of you who remember Greg Blimling's work, who is a IU master's grad, I have to, you know, I'm proud of Greg and his work in student affairs in particular. And Greg identified these 21st century accountability demands. And this was in 1999. And for those of you who need to remember what 1999, like how long ago that was actually when Brad Pitt and Jennifer Aniston were still together. And look how young Brad Pitt looks in that picture. It's really amazing. So that was 1999. But for me, 1999 doesn't really feel that long ago, you know, in the whole kind of scheme of things. And these issues about, you know, this higher ed being more accountable for student behavior, some of these pressing compliance issues that we talked about, that's a huge issue for accountability. It was huge in 1999, and it continues to be huge. Cost efficiency, this idea, remember outsourcing, that was all the kind of buzz at every conference was, oh, you know, we're going to outsource, we're going to make everything more affordable, we're going to really change everything, we're going to outsource, we're going to unbundle student service fees. These were all the things that were going to help us be more accountable. A lot of places downsized student affairs units during this time. These are the things that happened under that accountability time. And then that we actually had this attention to effectiveness of student affairs programs. So there was attention, even in 1999, that this is an important dimension around the effectiveness and demonstrating the impact and value of programs and services, and in particular, contributions to student learning. So this is not new. These pressures are not new. And the agenda in 2014, by, you know, kind of my summary of this work, is that those 1999 issues continue. Those are still on the agenda. And for those of you who need a 2014 reference, just so we can continue the images here, yeah, so this is my kind of 2013, 2014 with Pharrell Williams in this really cool Smokey the Bear hat and the robots during his Grammy Award ceremony. So this is kind of what 2014 is about. So, you know, we are concerned about ongoing contributions to student success, this concern about retention and completion and high levels of engagement. So it's not just that students complete, but they actually get something out of their experience. And that we are aligning our work more with the institutional mission and goals, that we're not working on parallel tracks, we're kind of completely conjoined because there is so much to do at an institution level. We really do need to have everybody working along the same lines. The contribution to student learning is still there, and I think it's even more pressing. And then evidence of data-informed practice. So we've kind of refined this a little bit more and demonstrated improvement on practice based on data and information. So these are kind of the current, what I see, the current accountability concerns. And this is the agenda for today. So still 1999 issues, but new ones kind of layered on that. And I think this symposium really raises some pretty serious questions about these issues. And I really like this line that student affairs must be engaged in helping higher education institutions respond with solutions to these challenges. You know, that's exactly what I want to be doing. I want to be kind of arm in arm thinking about how do we help respond to these challenges in higher education. They're challenges for the whole enterprise. It's not just, student affairs alone. It really is the whole enterprise. So this is what I hope we can do, but it does have implications for our work. It doesn't mean that we can keep doing things the way we did, and we can't layer on more responsibilities. Some things probably have to go, and those are scary things to think about. And according to the Presidential Symposium kind of materials, this additive model is really unsustainable, and I probably agree with that. So how are we gonna approach this task? What are we gonna do about it? So I do think it does require some rethinking of student affairs practice, and to think about 5 things, and this is what I'm going to frame the rest of my comments around. And I really hope this is a reflection for you. I hope that as I'm talking, you're doing a little reflection, and I have some reflective moments in here to, I guess, do we have forced? Isn't reflection supposed to be voluntary? I'm gonna try and force it, but okay, so some forced reflection. So the first one is what I think the accountability agenda does is it requires us to rethink and put student success and, in this case, engagement at the forefront of our agenda. That's what we're about. And I'm going to have us take stock here in a minute. So I'm going to go through these first, and then we'll do a little stock taking. So this is the first one, forefronting student success and engagement in our work. The second is to build more robust campus partnerships. I think we've really hammered this one already, this need for robust campus partnerships. Third point that this accountability climate really demands is demonstration, justification of program effectiveness and contributions to student success and institutional goals. So it's not enough just to say this is a really good program and people really enjoyed it and everyone was satisfied. How do those things relate to the larger student success and institutional goals? So it's great that the program was well received, that students came, but what did they get out of it, and how does that relate to the institutional goals and mission? We need more data-informed action. This is, Diana really illustrated this in its incredible value, is that we need to be confident in the data we have about, in this case, whether it's programs or our students' experience, and we need to say, this is what we're acting on. Just like UTEP did, to achieve the tremendous access and student success that they achieved. We need to be confident in that. And then this last emphasis on student learning. So this one is, the persistent one from the list before, that we need to be more attentive to student learning outcomes in particular. So let's do a little stock taking on these dimensions. So the dimensions, the 5 dimensions I mentioned, and then I'm going to give you kind of my take of what that is for the field. And I hope you're thinking about, okay, what's the status of that on my own campus? What would I say? What grade would I award? How well do I think our own campus is doing around this dimension? So the first one, all right, so forefronting student success and this student engagement agenda. I actually think the field is pretty well grounded in this. I think we've got good scholarship to suggest why this is important, what we should be doing. It's our strong suit for sure, and we need to be the leading voices for that on campuses and in the field. The challenge, it's not always fully practiced. We kind of, we're not always out there necessarily leading the charge on these issues, and we're not always the ones kind of convening the meetings on our campus that involve these more widespread stakeholders. We'll do it within our units, but we're not necessarily looked to across the campus for this expertise. So I think this is a real strong suit of ours, and we need to keep pushing it in the field. Robust partnerships. We've been talking about powerful partnerships for a long time in student affairs and how important that is. I think it's a clearly expressed goal. It's well articulated in all of the student affairs administration books that I've ever read. And it's out there, but it's not practiced as much as I think we espouse. So I think this is an area where we can push a little bit more, but we've, again, got pretty good grounding around this dimension. The third one, demonstration and justification of program effectiveness. I think we've had some tremendous advances, particularly over the last probably 10 years, around our capacity to do greater program effectiveness. The expertise is there, but it's real uneven. Some campuses have some really strong programs for evaluating programs and demonstrating effectiveness and connecting that to institutional goals. Other places, it's like, you know, I will go there and they won't even understand what I'm talking about. So I think, whoa, all right, this is real uneven in the field. The other thing, data-informed action. I think this one relates to number 4. I think we're better about doing data-informed action, but it's not everywhere, nor is it well documented when we do this. We just kind of say, this is our new program. We need to say how we got there. How did we decide? What data informed the development of this new program? Because that's what's going to help you get money for it. That's what's going to help it stay in place if it's really serving the value that you claim. And it's also just going to be really helpful for that aspect. So it's not everywhere, nor is it well documented. The last one, emphasis on student learning outcomes. This one I think has probably been our biggest challenge. I think it's well grounded in our field. The student learning imperative really launched all this, and I'll mention later that the monograph, the Learning Reconsidered monograph, really just laid out a perfect framework for this. But it's, again, not always well practiced. It's, again, another uneven kind of aspect of our work. So that's my sense of the field. And I hope at the, while I was talking, what is the state on your campus? How would you evaluate your own campus along these same lines? Or would there be some areas where you say, we got this one. We're really strong around program effectiveness, or we're really strong on emphasizing student learning outcomes, or maybe you're really growing those areas. I would even accept that as a positive thing, because this takes a lot of work to do. But see how well you do. So I'm going to go through these and talk a little bit more about them, just to give you a even more flavor of what this really is all about. So this first one about student success and engagement and why it's important. I mean, this is a pretty strong theme. It's probably the strongest theme. I would probably argue it's probably the most important theme on here. We can collect data all we want, but unless we're doing it for the purposes of student success, frankly, I'm not really interested in it. So I want to know what it is that we're doing around student success. So we got to marshal resources to make completion a priority. How much is that driving our work? We're concerned about completion, we're concerned about student success. How much are all of our initiatives oriented around student success? And then, how much are we really ensuring that students are active, engaged participants? Remember that statistic I showed you earlier about how little they're studying and how little they're involved, at least as seniors, in co-curricular activities. NSSE data show that there are a whole lot of other opportunities, unfortunately, that a lot of students are missing out on, high-impact practices being one of those. The fact that only about actually, I think 18% of non-first generation students participate in study abroad experiences across the board. 8% of first generation students participate in study abroad. That's just not, we can do better than that. We can definitely do better than that. So to think about, are there experiences, practices that we want students to have? How are we ensuring that? How are we ensuring that they're active and engaged in that? The other dimension is, so a little reflection here. So as I think about this student success agenda, I hope you're thinking, all right, am I contributing my expertise and capacity to the persistence, completion, and decreasing time to degree efforts on my campus? Are you involved in those conversations on your campus? Is somebody from the unit really pretty active around those dimensions? How involved are you in, if there is a racial, ethnic completion rate gap on your campus, are you involved in those discussions? Is that an active discussion on your campus? And if it's not a conversation that's happening on your campus, you can raise your hand and say, I'd like to start this investigation. I'd really like to start looking at this to know how we're going to, are we going to look bad if we move to these measures that really start to demonstrate? I mean, those measures are already out there. They're already, you can look them up right now on college results online and see the exact difference in your racial ethnic graduation rates at every single institution in this room. So that information is already out there. What conversation is going on your campus around what that means? The other one is gateway courses. This has become my new favorite topic, thinking about how many students are shut out of degree programs, who are shut out of college completely because they get into a course that has a high failure rate, a high DFW rate, and they don't know what to do. They're in it, they're in that chemistry class, they're in that psych. Actually, psych is one of the biggest offenders that people don't look to a lot. They're in this course and they don't know what to do, and they end up dropping out or not going into the program that they thought they were going to go into. Are you involved in those conversations? Gateway courses push students not only out of majors, but they also push students out of college. So let's think about that as a site for this work. Are you ensuring that students are involved in high-impact practices, that they're having these really highly engaged experiences? Are you involved in those conversations about how to increase service learning experiences or undergraduate research or whatever it is your campus really likes to do and you know works for your students? How much is student affairs at the table for those kind of initiatives that are really student success boosting? And then finally, just overall fostering students' higher level of engagement across a variety of different practices we know matter. You know, that's where we need to be. And to think about this, what does that mean for your campus? What are your, if you have NSSE results, or if you're from a community college and you have SSE results, you know, what does that look like? At least as a clue or a way in to some places that you might say, you know, I think we can really do something around student-faculty interaction through these programs, because our scores are not great around that dimension. Let's do something. So these are some things to be thinking about. So I hope you're reflecting on, you know, are you involved in these conversations? How involved are you in this? One of the things that my colleagues, Kathy Manning and John Chu, and I, when we just updated the one size does not fit all, and we were fortunate enough that Rutledge moved us to a multicolored cover this year, as opposed to, for those of you who remember, the dull green color that we were, you know, the first round, the first edition was this boring dull green color. This is much more entertaining, this version. And we updated it and really talked about how should student affairs be practiced, or what might it look like if we're really oriented around engagement and success. And we profile 11 models and really describe the different ways that student affairs can be practiced. Because just like there's diversity in the sector, there's diversity in how student affairs can be practiced too. You know, it doesn't have to be done. We're not trying to homogenize the profession. We really want to allow that diversity, but you're going to make choices, and you need to know who you are, who your students are, in order to make the best choices about how to drive forward the student affairs, the student success and engagement agenda. What student affairs model is best, given who you are? So I encourage you to, to really take a look at this and think about it. What it really outlined was this notion of how should we practice. If we're going to emphasize educationally effective practice, if we're going to focus on engagement that we know matters for students, how do we organize ourselves? So this might be something to think about in terms of considering your model for practice. What this book really illustrates is that when student success and engagement are a priority on campus, it makes a difference around important things like graduation and completion and retention rates and the overall level of engagement. Figuring out what's the best model for your institution is exactly what I think. That's the kind of reflection we hope people are doing in the field. It makes a difference. So NSSE is, one tool. I actually love the idea of multiple measures. I think we should be, using a plurality of methods. I really like lots of different things, but I do work for NSSE, so I can talk about it because I work there. But, I think it is really helpful to think about what data do we have about how much student success is really being emphasized on our campus. And I'll just put some prompts out here. What would you, if you knew that more than 50% of your seniors spent that 0 hours in co-curricular activities, wouldn't that get you charged up a little bit? I sure would be concerned about this. What are our seniors doing? And believe it or not, I've looked at plenty of institutions where upwards of 60 or 70% of seniors are reporting 0 hours. Now, there's an incredible range in this too. There's, this story is, again, not singular, but, if I were at this place, I would be really concerned, thinking about, what is the, we know involvement is critical, not only for a good educational experience, but it helps with persistence and retention. This is not just a, fun thing to do. This is about persistence. It helps, and it helps students build those cohorts that we know matter. What would you do if you knew that your first-year students worked more frequently with peers outside of class on academic work than peers at comparable schools? This is a great thing. Your students are working more with their peers on academic tasks outside of class than at your comparable comparison or your peer institutions. Boy, I sure would want to know, where is that happening? How can I foster it? What's contributing to that? Is it because we created these new study lounges in the residence halls? Is it because we really tried to make course scheduling, have it so that students can take advantage of that time in between courses? What's contributing to this thing? What is it that we can learn from these data? What can it motivate it, and what can we learn about our students' experiences? What if you knew that after implementing a new multicultural education initiative and expanding diversity programming, your NSSE scores on diverse learning experiences, a highly valuable workplace skill and something we know we want all students to leave with is better understanding of diversity and diverse learning experiences. What would you do with this? I mean, I sure would be promoting this, encouraging it, investing in that multicultural education program. This is the kind of data-informed action around student success I think we want to see in our work and in the field. So the reflection then, the reflection. So to what extent is student success at the forefront of student affairs practice? I kind of gave it a pretty good grade earlier. I think it's pretty well grounded. But, you know, thinking about what are the student success concerns on your campus and how can you get into those conversations? So to what extent is student affairs practice oriented to this concern, this kind of student engagement and success at the forefront? So I'll let you do your own evaluation. Would you give yourself, okay, that's something very much or quite a bit. We're really at kind of the upper end of that scale. Or would you put yourself at some or very little? You know, that's really not, you know, student success and engagement is not really something that we spend a heck of a lot of time of orient our work around. So this is for your own, I won't make you report out, but something to think about. This is the forced reflection. All right. That's the first one, the student success forefront. The second one is the value of partnerships. I think we've really talked a lot about this one and have already had some great examples of how partnerships are so important to the work that we need to do given the pressing accountability agendas. It is what matters, this student affairs, academic affairs link. It mattered when we studied high-profile institutions in student success in college. That was really important when we went back and revisited those institutions. They came out even stronger that the student and academic affairs partnership was critical to moving student success agenda forward. It's part of the accountability press. We've got to be more effective at working on this together. You know, as I brainstorm, what are the partnership opportunities on campuses? How can we connect student affairs to more institution-wide initiatives? Are you involved at all in gen ed assessment? You know, what's happening on gen ed assessment? There are a lot of campuses that do this periodically and think about what general education is supposed to do. Is student affairs involved in that? That's actually where I got my start in assessment, is doing some work as a student affairs practitioner on a gen ed assessment committee. Centers for Teaching and Learning. Is student affairs at all connected to working with other people who are concerned about pedagogy on campus? How students are learning, what they're learning. I think not only do you have a place at the table in those settings, but you also have something to contribute to those settings. So thinking about where might you create some partnerships? I think even more doing that connection of how are student affairs goals and initiatives connected to institutional learning goals and outcomes. This is another clue into potential partnerships on campus. Where is there synchronicity? How well are we aligned? And then, you know, if you're not aligned, you better think about, is this really important for us to be doing? Given institutional priorities, to be thinking about that. What's of interest? What's on your provost's mind right now? What is he or she thinking about? You know, if you're not sure about that, I think it's really important to know. And again, this developing relationships with other units, finding those opportunities for partnerships in places that you might not automatically think of, in institutional research, in centers for teaching and learning. Again, all of these places are sites for partnerships. Institution-wide learning goals are becoming more and more prominent, and at the last review that we did when we conducted this with NALOA, 84% of colleges and universities had institution-wide learning goals. Do you know what yours are? What are the institution-wide learning goals at your institution? And are your outcomes aligned to that? So all the provosts, this is corroborated by AAC and U data as well. What are these learning goals, and how well are you aligned with these? And then the harder question, are co-curricular learning goals specified anywhere there? And if not, why not? And why, you need to get them in there because they're valuable. And to talk about where that learning is happening as being not just something that's kind of, happening only in the classroom. It's really, we need to make sure that co-curricular environment is recognized for that. And are they in the strategic plan? This is another guiding document on a campus. Are they in the strategic plan? I'm going to just quickly go through an example of a place that I think has done a nice job of doing this work. Ramapo College did a really nice collaboration between student and academic affairs around some student success concerns that they had. They, were concerned both about, kind of making sure that their student affairs division was still kind of at the top of its game, addressing the issues that were persistent in the field. They were getting, as an institution, a lot of interest around high impact practices, and were a little bit concerned about some retention rates over time. And went through this pretty serious exercise, a couple year-long exercise to develop what they ended up calling key points of engagement. So they did this map, essentially, of their college experience, their undergraduate experience, and said, where are the key points of engagement in experiences across the board in our students' experience? And they identified these academic, social, and personal, and campus and civic key points of engagement, and then identified along the left-hand side here all the different ways that students connected with these larger institutional goals. So orientation worked towards some of these social goals that they had for their students. I don't even know what some of these programs are. Maroon Madness, whatever the heck that is, had goals that were around social and personal. So they really mapped out their curriculum to say, these are the key points of engagement that we're interested in investing in, that we think matter around institutional learning goals, and we're going to study their effectiveness. So we're going to spend a year studying their effectiveness. This was really important to bringing people together on their campus. They brought student affairs, academic affairs, enrollment management. They had a huge team of people working on this for a couple years to do this through the first year, sophomore year, junior year, senior year, to identify these key points of engagement. And I think this is another place of, they're recognizing the value of partnering around these institutional learning outcomes. So to what extent are you partnering around these same kinds of student success outcomes and assessment? Here's another chance for your reflection. How well are you doing around this? Is it something you do a lot of, very much, or quite a bit, or something that you do very little of on your own campus? So think about that in your own practice. How ready are you for that aspect of accountability? The third one is about demonstrating effectiveness. This, you knew the real assessment question or the real assessment press was going to come from me at some point. Okay, here it is for those of you who are really waiting. How do you know your program is making a difference for student learning and success? This is the demonstrate effectiveness issue. We're doing pretty well. I think we've really expanded capacity, particularly doing some great efforts. I'm so glad that Gavin Henning and Laura Bayless are here as leaders in a lot of this work. What they've done to contribute to the field's development in this regard is really quite important. So I'm really happy about that. I think we've done a nice job of helping people be better at this work. And there are a lot of places that now are better at this work. This is just an example from the University of Texas at Arlington that uses the CAS standards, the Council for the Advancement of Standards, to guide improvements. They have an assessment team. That, I hope this sounds familiar to you. I hope you're saying, yeah, we have that, we have that. I hope that is what you're saying. But we need to make sure more places have it and that it's meaningful. But they have some really nice assessment work going on their campus, and it's doable. It's doable assessment work. It's usable on their campus. Sacramento State, another place that I think has really been really pushing the boundaries on thinking about program effectiveness and outcomes. They participate regularly in their standard campus non-academic program review process. Does your unit get regularly reviewed as part of program review processes? If that's not familiar to you, you might want to poke around a little bit and see, what are the program review processes for academic departments, and do we participate in stuff like that? Sacramento State does, and their Student Affairs Division produces a report. They also produce regular assessment plans and assessment reports. So there's kind of this idea that we're going to not only measure our effectiveness, but we're going to demonstrate it to people. We're going to actually get some reports out there to show people what it is that we do, that we make a difference for learning. The other thing is to be, as I just was illustrating with those examples, is to be a lot more transparent. I just received a nice report from Denison University that I'm always kind of collecting these things. So if you have one that you think is really a good model, send it to me. I would love to be able to showcase the work, when I'm asked to do these kinds of things. But Julie over at Denison sent me this report, and I think it's a really good example. It's available on their website. It's produced by the Student Affairs Division, and they outlined all of their work around student development outcomes. The programs, what they've learned about the effectiveness of those programs, and what they contribute to learning outcomes, and the identified learning and student development goals that they have for the campus. And they're publicly posting it. It's available as a magazine on their website. It's very cool. Other places do this too, and I think institutions that have really outlined their student assessment work around larger learning outcomes are really making it much more transparent and understandable in using kind of commonly understood campus learning goals statements. So, that's really what I think we're after. So, to what extent do you transparently demonstrate what your programs can contribute and what their effectiveness is? And again, I'll ask you to kind of do your own little reflection here. How well are you doing these things? Are you really at a point where you can say, yeah, we do demonstrate this pretty well? All right, so the fourth one. Data-informed action improvement, kind of moving more along the lines that Diana Natalicio said was so important to UTEP work is, what are you learning from the data you're collecting? It's not enough just to demonstrate that you're effective. What are you learning from that? And what are you doing about it then? So if it's great, okay, good, you can say we're going to monitor this again in 5 years, see how well we're doing, or we're going to, or it's not so great and we're going to change this. So what are you doing to improve this work? That's really important. I have lots and lots of examples of how campuses across the country have taken their NSSE results and other data that they have and really made a difference around student success. This one comes from Cal Lutheran. Cal Lutheran was really concerned, and this emanates from their Office of Student Life staff, but within a larger assessment committee that they're a part of, and they were concerned about first-year experience program success. Is our first-year program really stacking up and delivering on the things that we wanted? But yet they saw in their NSSE results some gaps in co-curricular engagement, particularly of transfer and commuter students. So they were able to really disaggregate and isolate it to identify those populations of students. And looking at those results, they were able to make a pretty strong case for the need to invest in greater transfer and commuting student and different sorts of programs that weren't being allocated before. So I think being able to use data to inform some action is exactly what we want to do. I'll return to the Ramapo example because I think part of their work was not only to map the key performance, I'm going to forget the word, engagement indicators, essentially. But they also wanted to say, all right, we need to make some hard choices here. Are some programs not delivering what we thought? If they're not aligned to learning outcomes at the institution, we need to seriously reconsider whether we should still invest in them. And they actually abandoned a program on their campus, this Maroon Mayhem, or Maroon Madness, I may have messed up that term, because it wasn't delivering, wasn't achieving the results that they expected. So, that's a hard decision, but it's one that we're going to have to make in this climate. And I'd like it to be based on data. So as they collected information about their students' experience, it wasn't delivering in the way they expected. So this last reflection, there's plenty of data, I think, on lots of campuses, whether it's NSSE data or Noel Levitt's student satisfaction data. There's a lot of really good information. But have you acted on that assessment data and results in ways that help improve practice? And again, same response categories here, so thinking about your practice. All right, so the last one I want to get to is the point that we made earlier, and I'm sorry I didn't have this slide earlier when we were talking during the panel, but we need to make sure that assessment need not be complicated. This is one of my most favorite quotes from Barbara Wolverode, who's been doing assessment work forever and has been really effective at it. And I think, you know, so often we get caught up in what we think it should be. It should be this perfect design, and that's not what it should be. It needs to be usable, and it needs to be useful for our purposes. So we need to think about everything should be made as simple as possible, but okay, not simpler, but it should be made at least as simple as possible so that it's useful. So the last dimension, in this age of accountability, student affairs must really invest in student learning outcomes assessment and provide evidence of their contribution to learning. To me, this one is the one we have got a lot of great grounding. We know this literature. It's been a part of our profession for a long time. And so I feel really good about the purpose and value of this. But when I go around to campuses, I hear things like this. I just heard this. This one scared the heck out of me. That this actually came as an explanation for why a campus was not, a student affairs unit was not attending to learning outcomes. Attempts to develop learning outcomes and systematically assess programs in student affairs were met with unexpected resistance. I mean, this is their explanation for why they're not doing it. And I get that. I get that it's unexpected resistance. But what are you doing about it to try and really address this? Because they ended up, this same place ended up getting some serious recommendations. It seems like such a nice word. Recommendations from their accreditor about their lack of learning outcome assessment in co-curricular experiences. If you claim co-curricular experiences are vital to your students' experience, you better have evidence to show what they're contributing. So this was a real concern. Another explanation, we're moving from crisis to crisis and have no time to assess outcomes. Boy, I believe this. You know, I get it. I know that that's true. But we need to better address the learning outcomes. The VP doesn't appreciate learning outcomes and discourages staff from participating in assessment. These were a little more concerning to me. So we are well grounded in this, but our practice does not always match what we need to do. I'm going to skip this one. Okay. So again, the reflection. To what extent are you assessing the contributions to student learning? Where is this on your agenda? You know, it's a little different than just kind of assessment of program effectiveness. It really gets to a deeper level of understanding about learning. This one's a little tougher to get to. But again, I think it is where we're at. And I think we have, to end on a promising note, we have lots of resources. Again, you know, Gavin, thank goodness you're here. Laura, thank goodness you're here. They authored accreditation and the role of student affairs educator to guide the practice. There are resources out there, the ACPA Assessment Institute. We can do this work around this last dimension. We also have very strong foundations. If you need to bolster the arguments on your campus, draw on these critical documents, resources from our field. This is where it's at. This is important. And we also have some frameworks in place. There's no denying that accreditation is, you know, it's an active part of processes. You know, program reviews are processes that exist on every campus, and we need to look at our contributions to all of those processes. So I think there's a lot going on out there, and we need to essentially create energy on our campus to sustain these issues for accountability. So I'm going to stop there and just leave you with the last question, which is, you know, what does all of this focus on accountability really mean for us? How do we need to rethink student affairs practice? I hit on what I think are the big five for 2014 and beyond, and I hope you were thinking along with me about how well you could take stock on your own campus. So I want to thank you for your attention today. Thanks.